So I believe it can move on to item number 11, which is the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority. And Mr. Fontaine.
Okay, well, good afternoon. And for the record, my name is Jeff Fontaine, and I am with the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide this subcommittee with an update on the issues in the Humboldt River Basin. This picture is a picture of Palisade, and Palisade is this is in a high flow year. It's not what you would find if you were out there today, but Palisade is the hydrological divide between the upper and lower Humboldt, and above the Palisade, constriction, the flows in the Humboldt increase, so it's a gaining river, and below the flows decrease, and it's a losing river. And this is the gauge, one of many on the Humboldt River, operated by USGS and others, but this is the gauge which is really used for determining and scheduling the delivery amounts of Humboldt River decreed rights. So the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority was established in 1995 by Elko, Eureka, Lander, Humboldt, and Pershing counties, and was established pursuant to Nevada's Interlocal Cooperation Act. And it was formed to oppose a proposed export project in excess of 300,000 acre feet of groundwater from the upper Humboldt River Basin to the lower Carson River Basin, and that application was ultimately denied. And so for the past 27 years, the board of directors have continued to meet to discuss water issues in the Humboldt region. This is the geography of the Humboldt River Basin. It's entirely within the state of Nevada, has a massive drainage area of over 7,410 square miles, and it's about 330 miles in length, although others put the length actually a lot higher because of its meandering nature. But the river terminates in a sink near the Churchill Pershing County line, which is protected as part of the Humboldt Wildlife Management Area. Geographically, it's divided into an upper, middle, and lower division, and again, hydrologically, it's divided into two basins as described earlier. The history of the Humboldt River is pretty well documented as far as the river and the valleys and its importance to early migration in the history of the West. A couple of really important points here, I think, to point out. Historically, the high flows in the Humboldt River were documented between 1905 and 1925, so over 300,000 acre feet. But then immediately following that, there was a substantial decline in flows beginning in about 1925 through 1935. However, during that time, the state engineer started putting together an order of determination with the court as a result of increased demand and conflict between agricultural users. And ultimately, the Bartlett Decree was entered in 1931, and subsequent amendments through the Edwards Decree in 1935. So these are state decrees. There's no federal element in the management of the Humboldt River, except I would point out that the Humboldt River is considered a water of the U.S. and regulated as such by the U.S. EPA and Army Corps of Engineers. So the point here is that those decrees were based on irrigated acreage during a time of plenty of water. And most of the most senior Humboldt River system surface rights date back to 1861. So practically all of the junior groundwater rights after that are junior those surface decreed rights. So you're all familiar with the economy, I believe, of the Humboldt River Basin. Water is extremely important to all of those economic sectors, mining, agriculture, and of course the corridor is important for key infrastructure. These are some of the data on the characteristics of the river. So 469,000 acre feet of perennial groundwater yield and approximately 757 or 758,000 acre feet of committed groundwater rights. So there's very little, if any, groundwater that remains. In 23, the 34 groundwater basins are over appropriated. And basically all the groundwater basins within the Humboldt River Basin have been designated by the state engineer. And the bottom line is that long-term overpumping of groundwater in those basins is impacting the base flow of the Humboldt River. These are the factors contributing to diminished flow in the Humboldt River. Loss of functioning riparian areas. These are creating problems with erosion, undercutting of banks, and creating a lot of the meandering of the river, and reduces the amount of groundwater recharge and floodwater retention and overall storage. Again, groundwater pumping, decades of groundwater pumping have led to increased capture of the Humboldt River water and its tributaries, and as a result, conflicts with rights of the Humboldt Decree. Warming trends have been talked about a lot today, and certainly the Humboldt River region is no exception. Reduced snowpack and earlier runoff as a result of warming weather. During the period of 2012-2015, the Humboldt region experienced one of the worst droughts since 1902, and the annual flow at that Palisade gauge for the 4-year period averaged about 82,000, maybe 83,000 acre feet, which was 30% of the historical average flow. And this year, the lower Humboldt precipitation water year, so October 1, 2021 to April 30th, 2022, was 104% of the median. So that was the precipitation, but the snowpack was only 79% of the median. And in the upper Humboldt region, precipitation was 90% of the median, but snowpack was only 37%. So October and December, we had the atmospheric rivers. Rain is good, but snow is a lot better because how much total winter snowfall you get and at the end of the winter and how fast that snow melts and when it melts are really, really important to the operation of the system, as you've heard from others as well. And it's a reservoir. It's the reservoir in the upper Humboldt region. So less snow means less storage and a lot less uncertainty for the river. And on top of that, there is the possibility that a lot of that snow melt is actually being lost through sublimation. So it goes from snow to vapor and is lost to the entire system as well. So these are some of the graphics, and I'll just quickly go through this. The stream flow of Palisade from 1902 to 2021. This is in 6-year blocks again. May 20th, the stream flow of Palisade was 99 cubic feet per second, or 89% below average. And that peak flow typically occurs between May and June. And based on this graph and others, it appears that the peak flow may have already occurred early to mid-April. And as far as storage is concerned, really the only significant storage on the system is at Rye Patch, which is what's used at the lower end of the system for irrigation in Pershing County. May 1st of 2021, the storage capacity at Rye Patch is 29%. May 1st of this year, the storage capacity at Rye Patch is 6%. So storage is a big issue, as you heard also from Mr. James in the Carson River. There is no storage except for Rye Patch and Lower Humboldt Basin, so you've got to have adequate flows in the upper region to move water to Rye Patch, which didn't occur in 2014 and 2015. It's unlikely it will occur again this year. And during years of average or better flows, then you've got no storage to capture those flows. And in 2017, there's about 300,000 acre feet that flowed out into the sink. And I believe that was the first year in many where the Humboldt sink and the Carson sink actually merged because of those overflows. So little to no storage capacity results in little to no drought reserve within the Humboldt River Basin. And with the short time I've got left, conjunctive management is really a big issue in the Humboldt region. It's really sort of the big test case for how you apply or implement conjunctive management on a system-wide basis. Conjunctive management has been utilized by the state engineer a lot in the past when you talk about individual wells and groundwater impacts on a stream or a river. But in the case of a large complex system like this, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of discussion and thought about how to do this. And the state engineer did issue an interim order, Order 1329, which attempted to implement conjunctive management for the system, and that has been appealed. But what I can tell you is probably the most important thing that we're seeing is the efforts by the state engineer to work with USGS and the Desert Research Institute to put together the capture studies to help guide that implementation of that order. So I'm out of time on this particular presentation. We have some recommendations in here that we'll bring back in order to the subcommittee at a further later date.
I was just reading through the recommendations. Thank you very much in the conjunctive management statement. So thank you. With that, committee members, I'd go ahead and open it up for any questions. So Senator Hansen has a lot of questions, but he's going to take them offline. So other than that, I believe we're good. Somebody keeps trying to call us, but we're not here. Okay. Nobody's home. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fontaine.
I think I'm up for the next one as well.
You go for it. It's all you. We'll go ahead and queue up the next one. So we'll go ahead and move on to item number 12 for the Central Nevada Regional Water.
Again, for the record, Jeff Fontaine with the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority. And again, on behalf of CNRWA, we appreciate the opportunity to provide an update to the Public Lands Subcommittee. This is just a quick overview of what the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority is. And it's, again, a regional government established by the member counties, 9 member counties in this case, which collectively cover about 80% of Nevada's land area, and a 23-member board of directors consisting of a combination of county commissioners and community members. This is the mission statement: to protect the water resources in member counties, so these counties will not only have an economic future, but their valued quality of life and natural environment is maintained. So the Central Hydrographic Region, in order for a county to be a member, it has to have a portion of the Central Hydrographic Region within its boundaries. There are 78 groundwater basins within 12 Nevada counties. It is the largest of Nevada's 14 hydrographic regions, covering much of the central, eastern, and southern Nevada. And the Central Hydrographic Region is characterized by the absence of regional surface flows, groundwater basins, and there are some interconnected subsurface flow, deep bedrock aquifers, and some productive alluvial aquifers as well. And much like the Humboldt River region, the economy in the central region, of course, is mining and agriculture and tourism. And I just want to mention tourism, and specifically outdoor recreation, is really becoming an important sector for rural Nevada economic sector, including the 9 CNRWA member counties. And bodies of water are really a significant outdoor recreation asset that provide those water-based activities such as boating, fishing, and brings quite a bit of revenue into the state, and makes Nevada a great place to visit and people wanting to move here. So protection of water resources is really an important component of outdoor recreation, especially for the CNRWA member counties. The issues in the central region are no different than pretty much every other region that you've heard from today, and that's balancing the demands among the various users, domestic, municipal, agricultural, and industrial users, and dealing with the various conflicts. Again, this is really a statewide issue, but within the central region, it's really intensified as well. Protection of existing water rights. You all know what NRS requires in terms of the state engineer's decision on water rights and what types of protections those with water rights have. But we are really, it's really important to the CNRWA members that no new permits are issued for a new water appropriation or a change of an existing appropriation if there's going to be a conflict, even if there is some interest in approving a new appropriation or a change. to try to mitigate that conflict. There should be no conflict, and I think we're pretty resolute on that particular position. Interbasin transfers of groundwater from rural Nevada. Excuse me. Advance the slides. Interbasin transfers of groundwater from rural Nevada to urban Nevada. I think that pretty well speaks for itself. Drought, again, there's no escape from the drought in the central region. Most of the region is currently in severe to extreme drought, and you can begin to see what those higher temperatures are leading to increased evaporation demand and decrease in the yields of the alfalfa and hay fields. Pasture conditions are very poor. Of course, fire activities are increasing as well. And by and dry describes a class of water transactions that typically involve a municipality or other local government paying the owner or owners of a farm for some or all of their available water rights. And agricultural water transfers, it's really I believe, a slow and rather invisible flow of water, if you will, from the region's agricultural industry, heritage, to meet the demands of growth, urban growth. And this is a phrase I think was coined in Colorado, where that is taking place, and something that we are very concerned about in the central region as well. Evaporative pond extraction of lithium was discussed a little bit this morning. As you know, Nevada is the home to the only operating lithium mine in the United States, which is in Clayton Valley. And according to the Division of Minerals, lithium exploration in Nevada has drastically increased in the past couple of years, and they estimate almost 15,000 active filed and submitted placer claims being located in Nevada, presumably for lithium brine, in 18 different hydrographic regions, most of which are in the central region. And so there is some concern on behalf of the CNRWA about the potential negative impacts that evaporative techniques used in mining lithium could have on groundwater levels and quality. And we will be continuing to work with folks to try to address that as well. Over appropriation of groundwater resources, these are the figures. Almost half the groundwater basins in the region are designated. And Diamond Valley is the only basin in Nevada currently designated as a critical management area. I'm not going to get into that because that discussion that was covered very well this morning. And I think as far as recommendations, we support increased funding to the Division of Water Resources to restore staffing, update water basin budgets, adjudicate basins, digitize data. We would request consideration to restore the water basin account, which was used to offset some of the general fund dollars for the Division of Water Resources this biennium. Support the need for need-based funding for counties to prepare and update water resource plans. This is a result of Senate Bill 150, which was enacted in the 2019 legislative session to require all counties to prepare a water resource plan over the course of about 10 years and keep those updated. And there are those counties that are needing assistance to finish and complete those plans. And then lastly, establish county groundwater boards for over-appropriated basins. Again, this is an issue that we've been working on and will continue to work on with the state engineer to find a way that we can authorize local groundwater boards in the counties for over-appropriated basins so that we can try to avoid them becoming critical management areas and try to be proactive in the management of those basins. So that concludes my remarks on this presentation as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I apologize, I had to managing a couple different things. So one of your concerns is listed as by and dry. Could you expand on that, please?
So what has happened in other states, particularly Colorado, is that as the urban areas grow, that the water purveyors will go out and buy up farms and from willing sellers. And over time, it's not just one farm; it's multiple farms, and there are cases where entire communities basically have lost their farming operations to the point where it's become an economic problem and problem for the entire community. So that's the term buy and dry. And I know in Colorado they're looking for alternatives to avoid having those types of scenarios play out. And we just want to make sure that in Nevada we can figure out a way to avoid that happening as well in some of our rural farming communities.
So this isn't referencing what we were talking about with the Walker River type project earlier today, or is that within that universe, but not quite what you were talking about?
Well, quite for the record, Jeff Fontaine, quite frankly, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but I guess potentially that is an example of maybe a buy and dry scenario, but I think it's more, I guess potentially it could be.
Because that's more of a restoration project than an actual taking it off the books.
That's right. And I think in that case, it's more of it's an environmental restoration project and probably more a case of returning water to where it had originally flowed in the first place, right?
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that I understood the term and had not heard anyone proposing anything like this. So just want to make sure we were all on the same page. So with that, Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fontaine, for being here. I have great regard for Central Nevada Regional Water Authority and the Humboldt one, and glad to see Humboldt's part of. It's quite a large representation of the state. So I'm glad to see you guys trying to work it out together. When we talk about this example of buy and dry, I'm thinking Owens Valley. Is that more of what we think of as buy and dry, where the water literally did go down to Southern California, where maybe with the Walker it went to a lake, but Mona Lake took the hit on some of that. If I'm recalling that right, I'm just curious on that. But I do have another question.
For the record, Jeff Fontaine and Madam Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Hanson. I guess back then. In the early days, buy and dry wasn't really a phrase, but I guess today you could probably apply that terminology to what happened in Owens Valley.
And then you mentioned established county groundwater boards for over-appropriated basins. What is, I heard you mention in your comment that maybe we could work with the state water engineer. What's the impediment? Okay. I'd like to understand what keeps us from being able to do that.
Again, for the record, Jeff Fontaine, again, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblywoman Hanson. So last session, the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority made a recommendation to the Public Lands Committee to authorize the establishment of local groundwater boards or county groundwater boards in counties that had basins that were designated. And state engineer had concerns about that. So we've been meeting with the state engineer to try to figure out, how we could come to agreement on our interest. And our interest is to make sure, I guess, or provide a better opportunity, if you will, for local groundwater users, the community, the county commissioners, whoever needs to be involved in those discussions locally, to talk about and have some input into decisions that are made by the state engineer, so the state engineer can hear those voices. And we thought it was a pretty good idea. The impediment right now is there's already authority to establish local groundwater boards. The problem is we don't want to do it that way because it would require those local groundwater boards to do X, Y, and Z. It's in the NRS. That's not the intent here, but that's the way the statute reads, and we don't want to create any more delays. We just want to provide input and have some more involvement in those decisions. So I'm hoping that we can work through whatever the state engineer's remaining concerns might be on that topic and bring a recommendation back to this subcommittee.
Senator Hanson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. When did you get Humboldt County to finally join?
For the record, Jeff Fontaine, again, through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Hansen. Humboldt County joined about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and we're very grateful that they did, because they only have a very small portion of one basin within Humboldt County, but they felt it was important to be part of the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority.
Well, I'm just glad to see it. I remember last time I was having followed up on that in a while. We talked to them and tried to get them to join. No luck. Your question on evaporative pond extraction of lithium. Albemarle has 20,000 acre feet of water in Clayton Valley. They're the only ones I know of that use the evaporative process. Ioneer and Thacker Pass, I understand, are not brine related at all. Are you aware of some future ones coming up or something? Because it seems like Albemarle is kind of the lone wolf in that whole arena, and they own all the water rights basically in Clayton Valley, and they've been doing that since World War II, if I remember right.
Again, for the record, Jeff Fontaine, again, through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Hansen. No, we're fully aware of Albemarle's operations. They've been, 1967 or maybe even longer, and what their processes are. We're aware of other claims. Railroad Valley, for example, is one, although in that case, the indications are that there would be a lot less consumptive use. Quite frankly, when I saw the number of claims that are out there in those basins, out of 15,000 claims, I have no idea. But as of today, Albemarle is about the only operation that's using, it's the only operation at all in Nevada for lithium extraction. It's brine evaporation.
Okay, I just wondered if there was something I was missing there, because with the exception of them, all the newer ones seem to be more traditional mining methods, not evaporative pond type. Plus, I assume if they do have an evaporative pond, they would have to get the water rights cleared through the state engineer and purchased from the local people or whatever. So I think there's some checks and balances in that. But all right, well, thank you, Madam Chair. So only a couple of questions I had for you, Jeff.
Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Mr. Fontaine. Appreciate it. So with that, I believe we can go to item 13, a presentation on the Truckee Carson Irrigation District. Mr. Jardine.
It's the last one on that. Right.
Please proceed when you're ready.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the Society. I'm so grateful for your work and this opportunity to present a little bit of information about our district. We're very proud of it. It has existed since 1918 and unique to our district. And I suppose I better go ahead and provide a little more information about who I am. I am the general manager. I have served in that capacity for 12 years. And I also serve as general counsel. And in that 12 years, we have seen a lot of different things occur, as you can appreciate. We saw the breach of the Truckee Canal in 2008. And I came on board with the district in 2010. And I suppose I can say my mission was to help resolve all of the conflict that arose from that catastrophic event. And I have a little bit of information about that to share with you naturally. We present for your consideration. I suppose all of you have a few of the little photographs, and I'll go through those in turn. But one of the most startling graphs that I present to you naturally is of the city of Fernley, inundated with water back during that flood event. That breach of the canal occurred on January, I believe it was January 5th of 2008. And if you can visualize the amount of water in a canal, at that time it was flowing at about 750 CFS. That's a pretty good rate. And because of the topography of the area there, when that breached, the canal is very flat, honestly. And so the water was actually flowing out of that breach area from both directions, compounding the effect upon those homes that were inundated. After that occurred, of course, we engaged in multiple studies. The Truckee Canal has probably become one of the most studied canals you can possibly envision. It, as John Zimmerman has described, and I was going to add, I suppose, that having had John here before me and had James here before me, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. They provided much information. The only addition I make to both of those is that when we talk about the Truckee Canal or the Carson River, or the Truckee River for that matter, I always apply the personal pronoun my. My Truckee River, my Carson River, my Truckee Canal, my Lahontan Reservoir. That's how we view it. And I'm proud of everyone who has participated here because I have always viewed those of us involved in water matters, it's a mission. It's more than a job. It's important to us. Water's precious, as you well know, as we all know. And so as a result of that breach of the Truckee Canal, the innumerable studies that have occurred, the investigations, our daily checks post-breach, when we restored that to its operating condition, it took several months. We put it back in order. And after that, everything changed. The way it's operated. It's been operated in a completely different fashion since the breach. We have 14 monitoring sites on the canal with alarms now that tell us when we exceed a certain stage elevation within the prism of that canal system. Things certainly have changed. And now comes the time in our day here where we finally have the money before us with which to do something about it. And owing to the bill or the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed most recently, we are among 46 projects throughout the West that has been approved to provide for repair to our Truckee Canal. And it's still an incredible challenge for us. We have been approved $35 million with which to do that. Now, the environmental impact statement that came out associated with this project provided that, and a record of decision that ensued from the regional director in Sacramento with the Bureau of Reclamation, provided that the preferred alternative out of that was to take 12 miles of the canal and line it. And we're talking about an 80-foot section, each foot, lineal foot, of concrete overtopping a geomembrane lining. And so the cost of that is roughly, it exceeds $10 million a mile. That project has been downgraded. The scope of it has been reduced to approximately 3.56 miles of concrete lined canal. And we will replace what is known as the Fernley check structure, a large structure there that we use with which to build up the bay, with which to provide delivery of water in the area of Fernley. Now, things have changed in Fernley, as you can appreciate. If I showed you a map of 1948, you wouldn't find a home on it in Fernley. These were all fields. And coincidentally, they were all flood irrigated. We didn't anticipate that would happen in 2008, obviously. But things have changed, and so many homes are going up. These fields have been taken out of production. In 1948 or thereabouts, we had probably in excess of 11,000 acres of irrigated lands, and that's down to 1,500. And incredible change has occurred. And then the breach. Now we have a problem. We've got to make it safe. And that was the reason for going through this process of an EIS, culminating in a record of decision. And so in making it safe, there are some collateral consequences, and perhaps you've heard of that. The city of Fernley has a portfolio of approximately 10,000 acre feet of surface water, coupled with 10,000 acre feet of groundwater, and historically has relied upon the seepage from the Truckee Canal with which to do what? To charge those municipal and private wells in the area. And there is litigation as we speak involving this particular issue. After this record of decision was authorized and We're now in the throes of getting this money and providing for this repair to the Truckee Canal. The city of Fernley has sued to enjoin that, I suppose, because of that historical reliance upon that groundwater seepage, for which there's no water right associated with it, no precedent for that presently, but relief has been sought through the Federal District Court for the District of Nevada onto the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we're hopeful at some point perhaps those issues can be resolved. I'm not sure quite how yet, perhaps with the addition of other sources of water, but it's an incredible challenge for that community, and we are very in tune with that. And so that's something to consider in time to come as you go through your deliberations and the sessions upcoming, naturally. But we're going on with that, and it's no small challenge for a little district. A little history. We have approximately 3,000 water users in this project. The largest single water user is the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, serving the Stillwater National Refuge out there in our neck of the woods. We have a tribe. We have a city. We have a county. We have the state of Nevada, the Division of Wildlife, and we have the United States Navy. And I would add, it takes a little water out there to float the Navy. We do just fine. And we're very proud of that association in our community. But we have all of these varied uses, and our mission remains constant, but we have a small user base. And so when you take a $35 million bill to build this, this is non-reimbursable. That's a tough challenge for a small district like us. Consider we have a $7.5 million annual budget, and we're going to discharge debt on a $35 million bill, and we're going to do that for 50 years. And the reality is that as we do that, we apply those resources for that kind of repair, which is necessary. There's so much more to do over in the Lahontan Valley, in the Carson Division of the Newlands Federal Reclamation Project. And so I lay that before you. That's what we're up to in our district. And we're both proud of that opportunity, but it's going to be cumbersome. All of that which I have just described has to go to election by our water right holders, as it should. Who pays the bill? Those 3,000 souls, entities that I spoke of. We have to get their permission, and we're hopeful that they will approve. Why? What if we don't do this? The reality is that if we don't provide for a permanent repair, because that's what we've been looking for since 2008, if that doesn't happen, the permanent solution would be, in the absence of that concrete lining I've spoken of, the solution would be to limit flow in the Truckee Canal to 140 CFS, unchecked. No ability to raise it against those check structures. It would be at that level, allowing 140 CFS flow through Fernley out to Lahontan for storage there for use by the users below Lahontan Dam. That would be catastrophic. That's the equivalent of essentially shutting it down. And so we're at a point where we must provide for this repair, and we're looking forward to do that. And I could talk to you for hours about these things, but at this point, I suppose I'll say, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions? And I'll have Ed and John answer them for you.
Thank you for volunteering your colleagues that are sitting behind you right now. We appreciate that. I feel like I'm back in Carson City again. So with that, committee members, are there any questions? I was sure Senator Hansen was going to have a question on this one.
The vote, you're getting 3,000 people vote, but obviously the different percentages mentioned. Fish and Wildlife Service actually has the highest ownership. Is the voting based on the percentage of vote ownership? For example, if half of the water rights are controlled by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they control half of the vote. And how do you work that out when you have 3,000 people there?
Thank you, Rusty Jardine, for the record. And yeah, that's an important issue. under state law, under Chapter 539, we have a weighted voting system. But we don't allow those other governments to enter into the fray. They're not deemed electors for purposes of voting. And so these are, our farmers typically that will engage in that voting process. And
so you have a weighted system. I was just kind of wondering how you did that. And I think it was 1993, we had question 2, I think it was, on the ballot, which allowed the Department of Wildlife to buy water rights to transfer that water down to still water. Is that program, I think that funding is actually finally, I think it was a 30-year allocation or some amount that was set up. It was a tax based on something in the Reno Sparks area. Are you familiar with that? And is that where NDOW got the water rights you're talking about being transferred out to the Stillwater marshes and so forth?
Thank you for that question. Rusty Jardine for the record. Now, what you perhaps refer to is the purchase of water rights by the United States for the benefit of the for the benefit of Stillwater.
I remember there was a question, I think it was question 3 in 1990. There was a big deal, and there was a tax that was put on something to purchase water rights, ultimately for, I think, Stillwater or the Carson Lake area, somewhere out there. So I don't know if I'm mixing apples and oranges here or not, but or did they transfer those water rights to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Lahontan area, particularly the Stillwater area?
Again, Rusty Jardine for the record, and the federal government came up with monies with which to provide for the acquisition of water rights. Now, when we spoke earlier, Assemblywoman Hanson, we talked about buy and dry. Well, we've had a little flavor of that in the Lahontan Valley. Mm-hmm. When we talk about Hazen and the Swingle Bench, water flows through those areas from Fernley through Hazen, the Swingle Bench area, if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. It traverses that area and goes on out to Lahontan. And through the acquisition or the provision of federal monies, the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe purchased water rights off of those areas, and it was transferred back into the river for the benefit of the lake. And so that's a program. And also the United States Fish and Wildlife Service accomplished much the same thing. In former times, there was let's say an overabundance of water, and then litigation ensued on a widespread basis. And we went through litigation. It was called recoupment. It was destined to provide an order requiring the district to make recoupment for waters that have been overappropriated. And so in former times, water was provided to these areas. There was really an overabundance, I suppose I must say. And then a time litigation ensued, and the need for water rights for the benefit of the refuge became apparent. A program developed with which to provide that, and they've had a very active program. And as you indicate, up until this time, it's just about to the point of expiration. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they've accomplished the goal in purchasing that which they had desired, but they're there close.
But the big problem right now is you have a canal that's 30, 35 miles long. From Derby Dam all the way to where it discharges in the Lahontan. I don't think it's more than 35 miles. But there's a 4-mile section going through Fernley that the government wants you guys to spend $35 million on to line the canals, but that also recharges the aquifer that the city of Fernley uses. Is that in a nutshell? Surely, though, on each end of that, if you have a 4-mile section of canal, there's still a great deal of recharge that must occur outside of that. That's insufficient for Fernley's needs.
Thank you again, Rusty Jardine, for the record. And I appreciate that question because that's an important component of what we're trying to achieve here. In reducing the scope of this, yes, there's going to be a corresponding reduction in the impact had to the city from that. And again, there's no water right associated with it, but the practical concern is, my goodness, turn off the water in a city? That's no small measure. Come to rely upon it. And we're very, I think, sympathetic to that. But the canal must be repaired in the name of public safety. And it has to discharge its mission of providing waters to all of those water right holders that we have all through the system.
Well, Madam Chair, I will say when you study that whole Newlands project, and the biggest problem was the years that they used to calculate the amount of water that could be taken off the Truckee River system and transferred to the Carson system. were all exceptionally wet years. And since that time, the actual amount of water that's available coming out of the Truckee watershed is substantially less than what they did all those projections on. So all those poor farmers downstream in Fallon and Burnley and stuff who counted on that water, with time it was like, hey, we're drying up Pyramid Lake. And that's where you had the Ordich decree. And then you had the Harry Reid's decision, which was actually really beneficial, especially to Pyramid Lake. Kind of hurt Fallon, but the reality was that water wasn't being fairly allocated. And Pyramid Lake, no question, very much in the same boat as Walker Lake is today. It was getting more and more, it was dropping because so much water was being transferred to the Newlands project. Anyway, sorry, Madam Chair, for rambling. But yeah, you got quite a job ahead of you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Senator. So any other questions of Mr. Jardine? Seeing none?
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Appreciate
your
it.
service.
So with that, it brings us to one of our last items for today, which is our second round of public comment. So what I'll do is I'll open it up to public comment here in the chamber and broadcast services. If there's anyone wanting to make public comment, please let us know. We'll go ahead and open it up for public comment here in the chamber first. So please don't wait to be recognized. Just come forward because I may not be able to see you. So is there any comment in the room? Seeing no one come forward, broadcast services, I'm going to give it a moment for folks to call in and then we'll go from there. So we'll stand at ease for just a moment. Okay, broadcast services, do we have anyone on the phone line?
Thank you, Chair Carlton. The public comment line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll conclude public comment. If we do miss anyone, you're more than welcome to email it in or send it to us in however you would prefer. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Our next and final meeting of the Subcommittee on Public Lands will be Monday, June the 27th. So look forward to seeing you all there. We are adjourned.